In my considerable years as a poker coach and poker training company owner, I've worked with 6 main types of aspiring poker player. These 6 reg types are not created equally, and if you watch this video all the way to the end, you will learn how to become type 6, the ultimate reg. As we go through the strengths and weaknesses of these types of aspiring poker players, ask yourself, which one are you currently, and what do you have to do to become stronger? Guess what? I invented a word. Some people think I'm renowned for that for some reason. The word is reg-creational, and I mean this with the utmost respect. Many of the poker players I've worked with throughout the years, and indeed some of the ones I've enjoyed working with the most, are people who fit the following profile. They've taken up the game somewhat later in life, perhaps. They've already been successful in some form of profession. They're generally educated, intelligent, relatively well off, and they're wanting to invest in poker as the next thing that they want to take seriously in life. These people can't make as quick progress as a 20-year-old kid learning for the first time, generally, although some of them can. But there's a lot of room for improvement when you take a bright person, put them into a game that they're really passionate about, and give them the right resources for learning. I love working with these kinds of students. Generally, they have the basics down. They understand pre-flop. They've got like opening ranges down, 3-betting, stuff like that. They understand c-betting a bit. They know how to value bet against weaker players generally. They might have some like bad ideas polluting their thought process that they've picked up from watching certain like learn entertainment poker content on YouTube or whatever. Not like this, which is deadly serious poker academic content. And if you are the recreational, the thing to do next is to get better at the game, right? And it's to get better in the following way. You want to entrench a deeper theoretical framework of ideas into your poker mind. I made the Carrot Poker School because I wanted to give all walks of poker player, all sorts of regs, access to a comprehensive, fully thought out, structured course that leaves no stone unturned, that talks about poker in the objective sense of how EV works and why, and builds foundationally from grade 1 through 3 on some core concepts of how the game works, what I call the laws of physics of poker. People are reg-creational and not one of the stronger reg types that we're going to talk about in a minute, because they just lack that objective knowledge of poker theory. We don't want to copy poker theory. We don't want to play in the same way that solver does in every spot, but we want to get to the point where we can look at a sim and understand what the objective concepts are that govern the play of the solver at equilibrium. If that sounds like you and you are about ready to embark on a more serious formal poker education that's going to fill up that cohesive web of ideas, use code EMBARK25 at Carrot Corner for 25% off the full Carrot Poker School, any one grade or any other course or bundle, including the Golden Carrot, our biggest value package. That's live for 1 week only. Take advantage of it before it expires. By the way, the other type of reg-creational player that I often coach is a professional poker player who is reg-creational. And you might think that sounds crazy. How can they be reg-creational and a pro? Well, poker's a relative game, right? Your skill level relative to your opposition is what determines your win rate, not your skill level compared to some 500 NL 1KNL online crusher. So a lot of the people I enjoy working with the most are live regs. They want to get better at beating Big Stan, who's really aggressive and a pain in the ass to deal with. I made up that name, but this is the sort of thing I do with recreational players all the time. And I do recommend that if you're a live player that's a pro that wins because you have access to games that are really beatable, but you know that, you wouldn't win online at like 100 NL or something like that, then if you can get to a point where you would win online at 100 NL or a stake like that, just think how much you can decimate live games. So I sometimes say to my recreational live players, start playing a little bit online. It'll give us hands to review in our one-to-ones, and do it alongside the Carrot Poker School and build your poker theory. And then it's like overkill when you step back into that live game. You might be winning at 22 BB per 100 instead of 10. It's obviously very skewed live because the big blind is giant, but you get the point. Straddles, all of that stuff just make the gameplay way bigger than the literal big blind. We're doing this in ascending skill level. The next type of poker player we're going to examine is the volatile aggro reg. This player type is a bit stronger usually than the reg-creational, but has a ton of both technical and mental game leaks. I've taught a lot of volatile aggro regs and they just can't help themselves. They're sort of addicted to the feeling of winning pots, especially by bluffing. They don't like the idea of not winning a pot where they've invested a certain amount of money. They tend to go off the rails quite easily when things don't go their way. They have a sort of hate losing tilt. They might play very long sessions trying to recoup losses and just bulldoze their way to profit all the time. Sometimes they grew up in some kind of situation where they were bullied or had to defend themselves a lot, or it was like a dog-eat-dog environment that they were in. An industry like that has conditioned them to be overly fight happy and not know when to fold and when to back off and when to shut down bluffs, essentially. These are generally losing players in 50NL plus online, but they can win in soft lineups, lower stakes than that, and they can be a real pain to play against. If you are the volatile aggro reg, you will have a very steadily smooth upward red line with a very jagged downward plummeting blue line that's prone to periods of extreme plummeting, like above and beyond what variance is capable of doing regularly because you're tilting. This player type is destined to hit a ceiling pretty low down, as I say. If you are this player type, you're lacking a couple of things. One is a deep enough understanding of the game to see when your aggression is not good. And secondly, a proper poker athlete, professional mindset. These players generally need mindset coaching and mental game work to rewire the deeply ingrained aggressive pathology in their game, but they also need to understand the game better so that they can truly see why certain aggression isn't good, because even aggression that isn't good does work sometimes. These players have a high aggression factor, high 1-win soft flop, and they're generally not winning because the blue line tax is just eating up everything the smooth ascending red line is gaining for them. If you are this player, this is not an end goal. This is not a viable player type in the long term, but you can actually achieve a lot from this launch pad, because if you have the heart and that fearless attitude where you just don't mind risking everything, where you enjoy bluffing like a maniac, that can stand you in really good stead, because there are loads of poker players that would have been absolute killers if they could only cultivate that freeness, that willingness to just put money in good spots and accept risk. So you, my friend, if you are an aggro volatile reg and you're watching this being like, Pete, stop talking about me, man, you actually have a good skill set. You're just this unrefined, unchiseled, rough-edged poker player at the moment, and we can smooth you out. Do some theory work. Work with data. We'll get to this in a second, but if you're working with data and you're seeing where people are actually overfolding the most and where they're not, we have Grady of the Carrot Poker School for that, by the way, then you can refine your aggression in an evidence-based way. On the mental game side of things, it's going to be harder, but you can make progress there. Do not be afraid to seek mental game coaching, or you might go speak to your doctor or whatever. Like in 2025, we're not as reluctant to address those issues and face up to them, and nor should we be with poker mental game issues either. The third type of reg we are going to analyze today is Big Stan. No, we're not really going to analyze Big Stan. I think you get the idea. He likes to have 2 beers at the same time while playing poker, and that t-shirt says "Bat Bad" because it's made by AI, but I'm pretty sure it's like in the font of Iron Maiden. We get the idea with Big Stan. He's not a very serious dude. He likes Iron Maiden. Those two things don't necessarily need to go together, but they often do. I like Iron Maiden too, by the way, so not shitting on any Maiden fans out there. Anyway, let's get to the real third player type we're going to look at today, which is the ABC reg, one of the most common types of poker player that I've worked with. They have some potential. They understand some of the nuts and bolts of the game, but not enough of them. And because they are more conservative by nature, more drawn to taking the safe option, they don't have the theoretical knowledge to justify aggressive lines to themselves. And so they feel this inner resistance to aggression. They fold too much. They're sitting ducks for the MDA style reg. Because these players are so abundant, population data at low and micro stakes is largely driven by their playstyle, which means that more astute professional MDA regs that we're going to talk about later, they're better poker players than the ABC reg generally, and also the ultimate reg, whom we're going to finish with, are going to tear this player apart, because this guy or gal is just far too one-dimensional, cagey. There are not enough good lines on this player's radar. Their game is just far too simplistic and in the direction of nittiness. If you are the ABC Reg, you will have a plummeting, hemorrhaging red line. You will have a smooth winning blue line, but your green line will never really get off the ground. You'll feel like you're winning sometimes. You'll go on 11 buy-in upswings because you're not like a huge losing player, so you're capable of these upswings, and then you'll start losing. You'll lose it all back again, and you'll wonder, what is going on here? Like, why am I just like losing all of my profits every time I'm up? And it's because they're not real profits. You're a break-even player. Most ABC regs are around break-even. What do you do if you're an ABC reg? Well, again, you need to learn more theory. But here you've got to be careful, because it's very possible that you can learn more theory and remain an ABC reg because you don't spend enough time on your weaknesses, which is really drilling down on the logic behind aggressive actions and bluffs. You need to get good at understanding why the solver bluffs, where it bluffs, where is bluffing good in exploitative reality. And here's the biggest thing for the ABC reg. You have to get used to getting your hand caught in the cookie jar and that being okay. The human instinct to not take risks in front of other people comes from a deeply ingrained desire to remain part of the tribe, to not become socially disgraced or estranged from the tribe that will protect you and allow you to pass on your genetics. That sounds like extremely like reductive, but I am a big believer that evolutionary psychology explains a ton about poker players and their various leaks. So get a theoretical education, understanding, build your web of ideas for sure, but have a focus on the aggressing, hero calling, not folding, relative hand strength. ABC regs are really bad at relative hand strength, right? They're so boxed into their thinking and their rigidity of thought that they'll see ace high as ace high, not as a value bettable hand on deuce 7, right? They'll see king high and a flush draw as a chasing drawing hand and not as a high implied odds bluff catcher that's already beating most of villains' bluffs. They will see a chance to bluff as a scary situation where they might be made to look silly and not as an opportunity to generate edge. ABC regs also have mental game leaks to do with aversion, risk aversion, and I'll be honest, sometimes that's like a really deeply ingrained thing that I've struggled to actually get a student to shake off. I've helped some ABC regs become more aggressive. It's so much easier to get the volatile aggro reg to curb their aggressive instincts and dial them down a bit and perfect their game than it is to get an ABC reg to break out into good aggression for the first time. This is an upward battle if you've been playing like this for a while. It's not unfixable, it's harder, and you might need coaching. And now, in the blue corner, weighing in at 46 pounds, the GTO Reg. The GTO Reg has an alien on his t-shirt, and he has the word rectipier, which I believe is French for being kind of good at cards and then falling in with a bad crowd of solvers and having the wool pulled over your eyes and being deluded and thinking GTO stuff matters when it doesn't. Don't get me wrong, some GTO stuff matters. It's very important to understand where EV comes from when you're value betting, bluffing, where range thresholds are, what sizes are good in certain spots for certain hands, whether you can slow play or not in a certain situation. All of these things and many more like that we cover in the Carrot Poker School are basically under the domain of GTO because they're non-exploitative ideas. But theory and GTO are not the same thing. So when I talk about poker theory, what I mean is the objective lay of the land, like the way the game functions, the laws of physics, the nuts and bolts, the crude essence of the game and how it works. And when people say GTO, what they usually mean is the exact strategy determined by a sim when it runs its algorithm and reaches a pseudo equilibrium, right? A point where neither strategy can really be improved at all or can only be improved microscopically. So the problem with the GTO nerd is, the GTO reg, oops, I misspoke, is that he was on a good trajectory previously, probably an intelligent person that's quite good at strategy games in general, but the GTO reg got lost in the wrong sort of stuff. They're caring too much about mimicry. They're caring too much about balance, range composition, bluff to value ratios, and overall strategy. They have main character syndrome a lot of the time, whereby they might be thinking, how do I build my own range so that it's exactly X? So I have like 5 bluffs for every 7 value hands, and then like I choose these blockers but not these ones as a way of building that strategy. How do I build my own temple of perfection? As if by having the right bluff to value ratio that magical elixir will fall from the sky and propel you up to the next stake. It doesn't work that way because EV is the thing that governs your win rate, and EV can be learned theoretically by studying poker theory and to some extent by studying GTO solutions. But you have to be careful with the latter because a GTO solution contains the raw essence of all of the good stuff, the value betting thresholds, the sizes that make sense for a certain type of situation, whether you have to bluff, whether you can bluff, all these kind of things, whether you can fast play or slow play. But it also contains a bunch of noise to do with the preservation of being in an equilibrium. Like, you wouldn't be in a Nash equilibrium, you wouldn't be in a game theory solution if your strategy was easily refuted by some other strategy. The very essence of looking at a GTO sim is that you're playing a strategy that cannot be refuted. There are no improvements that your opponent can make apart from microscopic ones based on the accuracy of your sim. And so when you are the GTO reg, you've gone too far in the direction of caring about that stuff that isn't to do with EV and isn't translatable to your EV against a human opponent. For example, king queen on some run out being the bottom of your value betting range is transferable to a spot against another human, because you can say, well, in theory it's about king queen here, but this opponent's a bit stationary, they're at fish, so I'm going to value bet king jack here as well, or even go down to king 9 suited or whatever it is. What's not transferable to playing against a human, in particular a recreational player, is something like the solver only bluffs these combos on the turn at 33%, right? That's not really transferable. Them being break-even bluffs is transferable, right? The EV being the same as checking is transferable, because you can say, well, this is a stationary player, they're unlikely to fold these hands that the solver's folding, or you can say, this is an ABC reg, they're probably overfolding, therefore I'm just going to bluff. But the frequency that those hands are being bluffed at is not something that you can really transfer, because if your opponent's underfolding, you shouldn't decrease the frequency of a break-even bluff. You should just not do it, right? Because there's not generally enough visibility in a game for you to be incentivized to just moderately adapt the frequency of something. Like, you're playing rock, paper, scissors, suddenly you know that your opponent's playing only rock in that one hand. You don't just slightly dial up the paper frequency, right? You just play paper to beat rock. And that's how poker works too. So the GTO reg has gone astray. He can be brought back. It's kind of like a teenager that goes through that rebellious, like, terrible phase. I remember going through that phase as a teenager. It went on for quite a lot in my 20s as well, actually, truth be told. But, you know, you can redeem things. You can get back on track again. You can get your life together. You can get your poker game together. You can emerge out of the GTO caverns into the light, and you can see the stuff that really does affect EV. You can start using timing tells, reads, human versus human, data, population tendencies, whatever it may be. I don't mean to say that everyone that falls into this trap is some kind of, like, absolute Star Trek fan, as this would imply, but yeah, you probably are a Star Trek fan if you play only GTO. Okay, moving on. The fifth and penultimate type of reg that you will want to turn your attention to more and more in the modern era of 2025 is the MDA reg. Mass data analysis. This used to be a kind of weird, frowned upon, borderline unethical thing that nobody really talked about, but a few really technically savvy people did. And these days, there are countless mass data courses like Grade E of the Carrot Poker School. Data is data. There are some fluctuations between pools, but not very many. By and large, recreationals play the same in all pools. Humans are humans. There's some metagame between regs that changes, but the lower you go in stakes, the less that's true, and the more uniform and predictable the data is across stakes and sites. Mass data regs use this to their advantage. They don't need to know who their opponents are. They just need to know the broad player type. And then they know that while their strategy will be wrong against some outliers, it will be right against the main pool. And when it's backed by data, they generally have a very good mental game, because they get into a spot and they just click. They're just like, this is an overfolded spot. I bluff this spot. And I do it over and over again in an anonymous pool or a large pool or against a player that they don't have a big sample with. And they print like that. And a good MDA reg will also have a decent theoretical skill set generally, because to get into circles where people give you MDA or to, like, invest in a course that's along those lines, you need to see the value in MDA. And to see the value in data-driven strategies, you need to understand that real-life EV against humans is king, but you generally need to have been around the block enough to have accumulated theoretical knowledge as well. Most MDA players have some theory ability, but If you're playing 50NL or something like that, you'll come across the odd MDA player that's picked up a playbook or is working with a stable or something like that, or has an MDA-based coach that's given them a list of things to do, and they will lack the theoretical knowledge necessary to implement it effectively, and you will see them just auto-click every single time a bluff in some spot. Like whenever you bet small in the river, they will raise you every single time, and they'll do it with like hands that are very clearly like value beaters and winning calls and stuff like that. You get good MDA regs, you get average ones, and you get bad ones. The lower you go, the more bad ones you get. How can you tell if your opponent is an MDA reg? We'll talk about that in our future video. How can you counter the exact strategies that are fairly uniform across all MDA regs? We will counter that in a video very soon. Subscribe to this channel. Do not miss that video when it drops. Countering MDA regs is a huge part of poker in 2025, especially if you're playing 100NL plus, because they are more abundant than ever. If you have a rat infestation in your property, you need to get rat traps. If you have a lot of MDA players in your pool playing out of stables that are using the same data set or even similar ones, you need to know how to counter the strategies derived from that data set. We're going to talk about this. If you're an MDA reg watching this, you should be quaking in your boots, because we, Carrot Corner, have got your number. But also congratulations, because you're probably doing pretty well. But I would just say a word of warning. Don't just be an MDA reg. It is the most powerful way in the modern climate to drastically improve your win rate overnight. You know, learning the patterns and grade E of the Carrot Poker School, for example, will give you license to bluff in the right spots, avoid the wrong ones, call down in the right spots, avoid calling in the wrong ones, know how to beat fish, know how to beat the ABC regs that form most of the player pool that I mentioned before. So this is a powerful thing to do. Wielding it with knowledge is better than just doing it blindly, and its utility will diminish as you move up in stakes. Like as you come across better opponents and know how to counter it, you can actually go from crushing to getting completely destroyed, especially if it's a small pool of players that have got your card marked. So take everything I've just said with a grain of salt, but let's face it, these days, eventually becoming a bit of an MDA-based reg and blending that with other theoretical and exploitative considerations is very optimal, which brings us the ultimate form of reg, the Carrot Man. No, just using this beautifully chiseled, square-jawed Carrot Man to illustrate that when you get good at poker, you become more handsome. It's true. That's how it works. Your opponents are all miserable turnips and onions and potatoes, and you're this fine specimen. But the way to become this fine specimen is to put three key things together. One, the theory of the game, the nuts and bolts, how it actually works, how EV functions in the objective realm. Two, data, knowing which spots are overfolded, underfolded, overbluffed, underbluffed, where can you make big departures from theory, where can you only make small ones, and learning patterns and sort of regimes to apply to maximize EV. And finally, the more fluid human versus human exploit side of things. Who's that opponent type? Look at their bet sizing there. What does that usually mean? What sort of player does that mean that they are? This sort of exploitative detective work, in-game feel, timing tells. I don't know, the realm of humans doing battle in real time. Let's just call it that. How sharp are your senses there? How quick is your wit? That matters too. But putting these three things together is very difficult, because not only do you have to master each one individually, but you have to see how you can interweave them to create this finished product. And even when you get the right ratios of those three things, there's still room to grow, because you can always get better at all of them. Sometimes when you add a bit to one of those three things, either to the theory, to the data stuff, or to the in-game feel exploit side, you break the machine temporarily. You start over focusing on a certain thing and you have to recalibrate. And poker's always this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. If you've played for long enough, you'll know that's how it goes to learn the game. But the key is to be thorough with it, because it's a very difficult game, and spend a lot of time studying, reviewing hands, talking with peers, doing the right poker education. Don't just rock up and play and expect to be good at these three things. You're not going to have the right calibration to wield them together. But ultimately, guys, the message is this. I think you should aspire to be this all-rounder, this hybrid reg that can do everything. And if you want to get that right, that means that you should not be over-reliant on any one of those three things. Don't be a player that just needs to go off feels and instinct and, you know, in-game stuff, because that'll only take you so far. Don't get lost in the GTO cave and just get immersed in theory. Do get immersed in theory, but in a healthy way where you don't lose sight of EV being the holy grail. And if you do work in the dark arts of mass data, then remember that it's not the only consideration. It sets the baseline, and you still have to understand how big your deviations are. You need to know a bit of game theory, and you need to know how the game works, but you also need to be sharp and astute and pick up on things at the table that might make you want to deviate. These three things are so interwoven, you can't separate them. I like to think in our content that we demonstrate how to wield them as one, even though they are three distinct weapons. And if you want to get more of that, check out Carrot Corner after this video, which is now, because we're bringing this to an end. Don't forget the code EMBARK25 will get you 25% off everything we do. And yeah, that video is coming soon about how to counter the more MDA regs if you are playing in games full of increasingly aggressive opponents that are using those kind of strategies. We'll cover it. Let me know what else you might want to see. Smash the like button, do subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and we'll be back soon with more. Take care, guys. Bye for now.